welcome back to The Life of Riley.
Today we are going to talk about puberty.
Puberty. Well, puberty is a period in which adolescents reach sexual maturity and are capable of reproduction. Adolescence is a period of considerable neurobiological and physical development. Early adolescence is between the ages of 10 and 15, middle adolescence is 15 to 18, and late adolescence is 18 to 21. Adolescence is influenced by two things: capabilities for sexual reproduction and sexual desire, and the relating body and brain growth spurts that confer remarkable increases in physical, cognitive, emotional, and social capabilities. Now on to how does the voice change physically?
How does the voice change? Well, let's take a lateral view of the thyroid cartilage. John Cooksey says the most active phase of change occurs between ages of 12.5 to 14. Though there are many exceptions. What happens is that the vocal folds thicken and lengthen, laryngeal cartilages develop, and the vocal tract expansion takes place. Now on to voice classification.
In Duncan McKenzie's alto tenor plan, there is a 5-step mutational process of the boy's voice. The first step is going to be soprano 1, and that is for the unchanged voice, so that's not really a mutational phase because no mutation has started. The first step of the mutational process is soprano 2. Boys in this category will have trouble hitting the notes of E5 and F5, which are the notes at the top of the treble clef. There will be a little difficulty with that. But sometimes, even a boy who can still hit those notes has to be transitioned to soprano 2 because of the physique of the body. And another reason to transition a boy is if you start to hear an adolescent tone in their voice. Guys, we've all been there. We know exactly what they're talking about. This voice is not high, but it's not low, and it's very easy to crack. This is the alto section. Boys need to be transferred here to the alto section if there is difficulty in reaching the higher notes of the soprano 2 range. Even if they can sing the other parts of the soprano 2, if they have trouble hitting the high notes, it's time to transfer. Here you will notice that it's time to transfer because there will be a better tone quality. It'll be deeper and it'll be fuller. This is where the documentation process of each of your students really counts. Because if a student were to stay in the alto section for a year or longer, that student's probably going to become a tenor. And if the student stays in the alto section for 6 months to a year, the student will probably be a bass. The next section is the alto tenor section. This is the big one, Duncan McKenzie's. He named the plan after this. Students should be transferred here whenever they get the youth voice. Youth voice. It's when the voice is not high and it's not low. It's kind of that in between. It's a more developed adolescent tone. So whenever they get this youth voice in their speaking voice, that means their speaking voice is almost developed. There is going to be a drastic tone change, and this tone will only be found in the alto tenor section. Again, documentation is becoming very, very important. If your student stays in this section for a year or longer, that student is probably going to be a tenor. And if the student stays in this section for 6 months to a year, the student will probably be a bass. Sometimes you will have a weird phenomenon happen with the student. The student will leave from the spring semester, have a summer break, and come back in the fall. The student will leave your class as an alto and will return as a bass. This can only happen with a student who is developing into a bass. Because in the bass time, the student could be there for 6 months or maybe even a little under and then start developing into the bass range. So be careful. Document your students. You really have to look closely at your students. Really, really close. You have the tenor range. A student should only be introduced to the tenor section if their documentation has confirmed that. So if you have kept up with the student and they have shown that they've been in the alto section for at least more than a year or longer, and the alto tenor section for a year or longer, then it should be finalized and confirmed with their range dropping to an octave below middle C. Don't get confused with the confirmation of the range dropping to an octave below middle C with the student needing to have good timbre for a tenor. The student will not have good timbre until after high school because the tenor won't develop until after high school. So that's why it's really rare that a junior high has a tenor, because of the immaturity in the voices of the tenor. Their voices should be taken with extreme care. Their voices are going to be extremely vulnerable during this time. So don't pick music that is going to stress their voices out. Next, we have the bass section. Students who are introduced to the bass section have been confirmed by documentation, same as the tenors, that they should be in the bass section. They have spent less than a year in the alto and the alto tenor sections to be confirmed here. Whenever a student reaches the bass portion of their voice, you will see that the higher notes of the alto tenor phase are disappearing, but the lower notes remain. If you are ever wondering, well, it's not exactly clear that my student should be a tenor, it's not exactly clear that they should be a bass, classify them as a bass, and then reset them later when you have a better understanding of their voice, because you do not want to hurt their voice by them straining all the time to sing higher notes when it's not in their range. So tell them to sing in the bass and to relax the whole time. Tell them not to go too low if they can't go low. Tell them not to go too high if they can't go high. You should always encourage the voice to change. Always encourage the developing changed voice. No matter how much of the unchanged voice there is at the lower alto tenor part of that range, always encourage the lower voice. Now the tone quality is still going to be immature, but it will sound of that like an adult bass. Then finally, in the 11th and 12th grade, the boys will hit the settled status of their voices. And Mackenzie believes that once the boys have hit this status, that their voices are done changing. This is an example of Duncan Mackenzie's music. In this arrangement of the song, you will see that there is a soprano 1, soprano 2, and the tenor and alto line, and then a bass. The tenor and alto line are octaves apart, so that when the boy is transitioning from alto to tenor, it's easy because he doesn't have to learn a different note part. The next researcher we have is Irvin Cooper. He created the cambiata concept. He started out as an administrator in Canada and then moved to further his research at Florida State University. The mission statement for this concept is that it provides a way to keep adolescent boys singing through the voice change and to give teachers a method to accomplish this goal. Here we have Irvin Cooper's seating chart. You will see that there are blues and greens. The blues and greens represent the girls in the choir. Irvin Cooper created this method so that girls wouldn't get stuck just singing the melody and the harmonies. So he split them down the middle and they would sing both all the time. Then down here in the bottom left is the baritones. This is for the second stage of mutation for the boys. Then you see the cambiata right in front of the director, which is the first stage of mutation for the boys. Then in this little box, right behind the cambiata and between the green group, is the boy sopranos. This is the unchanged voices. Cooper believed that putting them here would give the choir a more rounded sound and would bring out that beautiful tone and unique tone that the boy sopranos have. Then to the left of the conductor and in front of the baritones is the piano. And then, of course, right in front of the choir is the conductor.
Then you will see between the blue and the greens, there are squares and diamonds. The squares mean that there are potential high sopranos. Irvin Cooper would do the voice testing and would keep up with each student and would see that they are specifically going to be a high soprano. Then you see the potential altos or potential low altos, and the same process goes for them as well. Now we have the ranges for the classifications that Irvin Cooper has set. You have the sopranos, which is a B flat below the treble, to a high F. This also goes for the unchanged boys' voices. Then you have the first stage of mutation for boys, cambiata. It goes from a low F on the below the treble clef to a C on the treble clef. Then you have the baritones that go from a low B flat on the bass clef to a high D. And then, of course, you have the bass, which goes from a low F to a high C.
The next researcher we have is John Cooksey. He created the contemporary eclectic approach. John Cooksey was a contemporary of Dr. Irvin Cooper, a student, if you will. He saw that Irvin Cooper's classification method was too narrow in scope to be used pedagogically. So he created a 5-step classification process. Cooksey had a process to determine these stages of maturation. The criteria used to determine this was range, tessitura, register development, speaking fundamental frequencies, and voice quality. John Cooksey said the most important out of all of these was probably range, but all must be taken into account for.
Here we have a summary of John Cooksey's 6 stages for changes of voice in the adolescent male. The first part is the premutation, the unchanged voice. The range is from A to F on the treble clef. The average age is 10 to 11, and the average grade is 5th to 6th grade. The characteristics are a rich soprano-like quality. Then we have stage 1, which is early mutation called mid-voice 1. The range is from A flat to C on the treble clef. The average age is 12 to 13, and the majority of these students are in the 7th grade. Average lasts about 1 to 5 months, and the characteristics are a loss of tonal clarity and richness in the upper range. Then we have stage 2, high mutation mid-voice 2. The range is F on the bass clef to A on the treble clef. The average age is 13 to 14, and the average student is in 7th to 8th grade. This will probably last 12 to 13 months, and the voice is huskier, thicker singing voice, often breathy. Then we have stage 3 mutation. This is the climax, mid-voice 2A. The range is from D on the bass clef to F sharp on the treble clef. The average age is 13 to 14, and the student will be in 8th grade. Average lasts about 4 to 5 months. There is increased breathiness and strain in the upper range. Pushing can occur. Then you have stage 4, post-mutation stabilizing new baritone. The range is B to D sharp on the bass clef. The average age is 13 to 15, and the student will be in the 8th to 9th grade. This will last about 3 to 5 months, and there is a firm sound, still lacking adult sound, and a blank spot at middle C. Then there is stage 5, post-mutation development, emerging adult voice. The range is G to high D on the bass clef, and the age is 14 to 15. The student will be in the 9th to 10th grade. The characteristics of this voice will be developing towards adult quality, lacking tessitura of tenor or bass, and there will be a clear falsetto.
Cooksey, differing from Duncan McKenzie and his own teacher Irvin Cooper, he looked into the adolescent female voice, and he created a maturation process for them as well. Their processes are stage 1, pre-pubertal, stage 2A, pre-menarcheal, stage 2B, post-menarcheal, and stage 3, young adult female. 1, it is pre-pubertal, the unchanged female voice. This voice is going to be much like their counterpart, the boy soprano, but much lighter in weight and not a lot of volume. The ages for these girls are probably going to be 8 to 10 years old. The next stage, which is stage 2A, is premenarcheal. Not sure why there wasn't 4 stages, but for some reason he did stage 2A and 2B. Probably because they're both menarcheal. One's pre and one's post. Back to stage 2A, premenarcheal. This is the beginning of maturation, the first signs of puberty and physical development of the girl. Breathiness will occur and singing becomes difficult at times. There's difficulty producing sound, and usually the ages of this girl will probably be 10 to 13. The next stage, which is stage 2B, is postmenarcheal. This is puberty. Tessitura in this stage can move up or down. That usually decides soprano or alto. And sometimes it can narrow. And this yields that a 5 to 6 note range will appear that is called comfortable singing. Comfortable singing is just the range in which the voice is comfortable. It's like you're talking, but singing. No thought, no stress about it. It just happens. Lower notes may be easily accessed by the young female student, giving the illusion that she's an alto. It's tripping you up. But what you can't do is let the child sing for an indefinite period of time in that lower register, because it may harm, here we go, the unsettled voice. Her voice is unsettled. It's not mature enough to handle a constant low register, even though she might can access it fairly easily, but it can't do that forever. So what needs to happen is that you as the teacher needs to vocalize the student in the entire range that she might have, and this will help with vocal development, especially if she may be an alto. So vocalize the entire range to get the student to that point to where they need to be. This will help with straining in the upper and lower registers. Continuing on with postmenarcheal. These students will have less of a control on their voice, and the students will mainly be 13 to 15 years old. The last step is the young adult female voice, stage 3. This signals the end of the instability of the voice. The range capabilities will increase and breathiness decreases. The tone becomes richer. Vibrato appears. For the next part, we're going to have to go to the vocal lab. Okay, we've made it. Welcome to the vocal laboratory. That's definitely not a church.
But this is a church.
Okay, John Heath, thank you so very much. All right, so this is my friend John Heath. He's going to sing for us today. All right, he's going to sing some exercises and do a little vocal warm-up. We're going to check his range. John Heath, can we do a little Q&A? Like, I'll do the Q and you do the A.
My name is John Heathcamp. I'm 10 years old. I go to school at Arab Elementary, and my teachers are Heather Phillips and Jennifer Stevens.
All right, so I really didn't get to do much of the Q, but you got to do a lot of the A, huh? All right, well, let's get started. Oh, but before we do, if I could ask you, do you think you can sing high? What would you say?
No.
You would say no. Okay, what about if you could sing really low? What would you say?
Yes.
Why would you say that?
I don't sing that much.
Oh, and I don't believe that. I think you sing a lot more than what you're saying. All right, let's get started.
Hallelujah, 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 hallelujah.
Let's go over example 1. So can you face that way for me? Thank you. All right, so this is your starting pitch, John Heath.
Da.
Wonderful. Here we go. 1, 2, ready,
go.
Da, 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 da. Da, 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 da. Da, 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 da. Da, 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 da.
Wonderful.
The example that John Heath just sang is too long and too wide of a range. It needs to be shorter and broken up into parts.
Okay, let's do example 2. Are you ready? Awesome. Okay, so here is your starting pitch.
Da.
Wonderful. Going down. Okay, 1, 2, ready, go. Wonderful. Okay, I'll give you your starting pitch, and we will go down. Okay. All right. Ready? Wonderful. Okay. I'm going to give you your high pitch again, and we're going up. Okay. Here we go. 1, 2, ready, go.
The second example that John Heath sang is much better. The range is shorter, and there are different sections for different uses. The uses would be for testing the student for excelling. So you would pass off the A section, then move to the B section, and then finally passing off the C section.
To classify boys' voices, Irvin Cooper designed a way to do this. What he would do is that he would line up all of the boys in his choir in a line, and he would start them out in the key of D major in a song that they all knew. And then as the song progressed, he would find the boys who sang in the lower octave, in the middle octave, and in the upper octave. And he would classify the boys to this octave: baritones, unchanged, or cambiata. So today, since I don't have a boys' choir, I have John Heath. John Heath is going to sing Mary Had a Little Lamb. And we're going to find what octave he is singing in so that we can fully classify him as something. You ready, John Heath? Here we go. So here's your notes. Wonderful. Here we go. 1, 2, ready, go.
Mary had a little lamb, little lamb, little lamb. Mary had a little lamb whose fleece was white as snow.
Wonderful, John Heath. Thank you so very much for singing with me today.
And what's with the short tie?
What are you, short?